Marriage is a fragile structure, built over years of shared laughter, whispered dreams, and everyday routines. But sometimes, even the most solid structures develop cracks so small that you barely notice them. That night, I realized a crack had widened into a chasm. Sarah, my wife of 11 years, stood in front of the bedroom mirror longer than usual. Her hair, makeup, and dress were perfect, shimmering under the light. She turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and said, "Work dinner. Clients from out of town." Her tone was casual, rehearsed even, but something in her stance betrayed unease. She didn't kiss me goodbye. She didn't ask me to wait for her. She simply grabbed her coat and left, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving a silence in the house heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking. Everyone has busy work nights. It's normal. But instinct whispered, something is wrong. I waited. I watched the clock. Every minute that passed intensified the quiet in the house. Then, at 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My heart skipped. I hesitated, then opened the message. The photo made my stomach twist. There she was, sitting across from a man in a quiet, candlelit restaurant. Her wedding ring was off. Her smile was intimate, reserved for someone who was not me. Rage threatened to rise, but I held it back. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I observed. Silence became my strategy, patience my weapon. I knew confrontation wasn't necessary. Sometimes, truth is most effective when delivered indirectly. I called the restaurant calmly, ordering the most expensive wine, dessert for two, and a card for table 14, where Sarah and the man sat. I dictated the message with deliberate precision. To the man sharing dinner with my wife, thank you for revealing the truth I needed. Enjoy the evening. Her husband. Paid, hung up, and waited. Minutes later, an unknown number sent me another photo. The man was gone. Sarah was alone at the table. The wine untouched, the dessert untouched. The gift had done its work, not as revenge, not as punishment, but as a mirror reflecting the reality she could no longer ignore. When she arrived home past midnight, her makeup smudged, confidence gone, she hesitated at the door. She didn't immediately move toward me. She sat across the living room, keeping distance, needing space to face the consequences of her actions. "I can explain," she whispered. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply let her speak first. She confessed everything: messages, lunches, emotional affairs. Not physical yet, but the betrayal was real. The weight of the truth pressed on both of us. "I expected you to hate me," she said. "I didn't expect this." I poured her water. Sat silently. "Anger would mean I still needed you. Kindness means I don't," I said softly. That sentence broke her more than any scream ever could. She wept, not loudly, not theatrically, just raw, human regret. Days passed in a strange limbo. We didn't yell. We didn't fight. She began to hand me her phone without hesitation. She deleted contacts. She canceled lunches. She answered questions honestly. I didn't interrogate. I watched. Every act of honesty slowly rebuilt trust, brick by brick. Weeks became months. Some mornings, memories of the dinner, the gift, and the photo made my chest tighten. Some nights, she would smile in her sleep, and I would watch her, hoping she understood the gravity of her choices. We weren't perfect. Triggers still arrived: a late-night message, a casual laugh, a name mentioned too lightly. Pain lingers quietly. But endurance became our strength. 1 year later, she asked, quietly, "Do you still think about him?" I shook my head. "He was never the lesson," I said. "He was merely the vehicle." She nodded, understanding the message. 2 years after the dinner, we walked into a small restaurant across town. No candles, no drama, just space. She pulled an envelope from her bag. Inside was the card I had sent to the man. "I read this 100 times," she whispered. "Not because it hurt, but because it reminded me who I almost lost." We held hands. Not as lovers rekindled in passion, but as two people aligned in awareness. Dignity had survived betrayal. Honesty had survived secrecy. Slowly, love, deliberate and careful, survived both. Sometimes I think about that night, the man, the candle, the gift. That act was not for her. Not for him. It was for me. To prove that even when someone breaks your trust, you can choose clarity, dignity, and patience over rage. Years passed. We did not erase the scars. Some nights, memories returned. But scars do not dictate the future when wisdom guides action. Betrayal may arrive. Lies may pretend to be gentle. But truth, delivered calmly and deliberately, always arrives. The gift wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was clarity. It was dignity. It was the lesson that changed everything. We stayed together. Not naive. Not reckless. Not blind. We stayed because honesty had been chosen repeatedly. Because strength is measured by restraint, not shouting. Because dignity, once preserved, never fades. Sometimes people ask if kindness is weakness. I learned differently. Kindness is strength. Calm is power. Silence speaks louder than yelling. And clarity, delivered with patience, can transform lives. That night, that gift, that silence. It changed everything. Weeks after the dinner passed, but the echoes of that night never left me. Some mornings, I would wake to the sound of my own breathing and remember the image of her smiling across that table, her ring absent, and the candlelight reflecting off his face. It was a picture I could never unsee. I began to notice subtle changes in Sarah. She moved carefully, almost cautiously, around the house. The casual laughter that once filled the kitchen felt restrained. She asked me more questions than she ever had before. "How are you, really? Did I say something yesterday that hurt you? Are you tired of pretending we're okay?" These questions were new. They were deliberate. And I saw in them an honesty that had been absent for years. But honesty cannot erase the past. It cannot undo the fractures that betrayal leaves behind. I began to reflect on the early years of our marriage. We had been happy, or at least I thought we were. The late-night coffees, the quiet conversations before bed, the laughter in our tiny apartment, those were real moments. And yet, even then, I now realized that small distances had begun to grow. Misunderstandings left unspoken. Small betrayals ignored. We had never been fully transparent with each other, and that night had exposed the consequences of those omissions. I didn't confront her about the affair after the first confession. There was no need. The silence was heavier than any shouting. The quiet observation became my method of measurement. Every act, every word, every gesture, she had to choose honesty. She deleted the man from her life entirely. No messages. No lunches. No excuses. And I watched. I had learned something essential: forgiveness is not a single act. It is repetitive. It is exhausting. It is choosing to trust, again and again, even when the wound reopens. One evening, I found myself staring at the old photograph of our first apartment. We had been young, naive, hopelessly in love. The simplicity of that time struck me. We had chosen each other, without question, without fear. And now, after the betrayal, I wondered, could that love be rebuilt? Could the foundation, cracked and broken, ever hold again? Sarah came into the living room, carrying a blanket. She sat across from me silently. We didn't speak. We simply shared the space. That night, for the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the complexity of our emotions. Love was still there, faint but present. Trust was shattered, but the possibility of rebuilding it remained. Over time, small gestures became our lifeline. Breakfast prepared exactly the way I liked it. A folded blanket across the sofa. Waiting patiently while I finished work, without unnecessary explanations. Each act mattered more than any words. It was in these tiny moments that I realized trust could be rebuilt not through grand declarations, but through repeated, deliberate choices. The second anniversary of the dinner approached. Sarah asked if we could go out, just the two of us. I hesitated. The weight of memory lingered. But I agreed. We chose a small, quiet restaurant, nothing dramatic. There, she reached into her bag and froze. Then, slowly, she placed an envelope on the table. Inside was the card I had sent to the man, the one that had exposed the truth. I read this 100 times, she whispered. Not because it hurt, but because it reminded me who I almost lost. I studied the card carefully, remembering my own hand as I had written it, the deliberate calm in every word. I realized then that the lesson was not for her. It had always been for me. For my own integrity. For my ability to respond without rage, without humiliation, without losing myself to anger. She asked why I hadn't used the card as a weapon, why I hadn't shamed her publicly. I told her. Because if I needed witnesses, it would mean I wasn't strong enough to stand alone. Tears formed in her eyes. I want to be worthy of that, she whispered. We left the restaurant slowly. Walking side by side. No declarations of love, no promises of forever. Just honesty, just awareness, just a commitment to face each day as it comes. Years later, someone asked me how I knew staying was the right choice. I said, simply. I didn't stay because she begged. I didn't stay because I was afraid to leave. I stayed because she changed in ways that didn't ask for applause. And I added, because the truth mattered. If she ever betrays me again, I won't hate her. I'll leave quietly, with the same dignity I stayed with. The night of the dinner and the gift had been a turning point. Not because it punished anyone, but because it demanded reflection, honesty, and courage. That single act of deliberate kindness and measured clarity reshaped the trajectory of our lives. We stayed together. We rebuilt slowly. We lived honestly. And for the first time, I understood fully, sometimes the strongest actions require no words at all. Months passed after the dinner, but the memory of that night never faded. Sarah moved carefully, spoke carefully, as if every action was weighed against the trust she had broken. She confessed everything, deleted the other man from her life, and chose honesty daily. I watched, silently, letting her prove that she could rebuild what she had damaged. One quiet evening, she handed me the card I had sent to the man, the one that revealed the truth. I read this many times, she whispered. Not because it shamed me, but because it reminded me who I almost lost. I smiled softly. That card wasn't for him. It was for me. To show that even when someone betrays you, you can choose dignity, clarity, and patience instead of anger. We held hands, not as naive lovers, but as two people who understood honesty, integrity, and the quiet power of deliberate choices. Life lesson. Betrayal may happen to anyone. Lies may hide behind familiar faces. But how you respond defines your life. Kindness, patience, and calm clarity are stronger than rage. Forgiveness is a choice, rebuilt daily. Trust can return, but only with honesty. Sometimes the quietest, most deliberate action is the most powerful, and it can change everything.